cumplimiento de una meta tan importante como la meta 3 del nuevo marco global de biodiversidad Comú, Montreal. Eso de como una introducción pues muy rápida. Vamos entonces justamente a dar paso a nuestra primera charla del día, que todo va a ser pues de alguna manera muy sucinto, muy cortito, para que podamos desarrollar un poco más de pensamiento crítico a lo largo de la presentación. Pero queremos invitar aquí especialmente a un colega que ha sido fundamental en la estructuración de muchísimas de las propuestas que hace la Comisión Mundial de Áreas Protegidas en diferentes aspectos y que nos ha venido acompañando durante muchísimo tiempo desde el nivel global, pero que además tenemos la fortuna de que cuenta también con una visión frente a territorios como los latinoamericanos, pues muy cercana, es decir, que ha tenido también esa fortuna de podernos acompañar aquí en la gestión de muchas de las áreas en la región por diferentes posibilidades que ha tenido. Él es Brent Mitchell. Brent en este momento está actuando como vicepresidente del Centro Atlántico para el Ambiente. Y también es dentro del marco de la Comisión Mundial de Áreas Protegidas nuestro vicepresidente en los temas que tienen que ver también con paisajes y educación. Entonces voy a darle la palabra a Brent, él seguramente va a desarrollar
Querida,
un poco más. Dime.
disculpa que te interrumpa. Tenemos
No te
un
preocupes.
video
Okay,
primero, unos
great.
saludos de Madu.
Thank you, Paula.
Ya.
I'm going to
Brent,
take
sorry,
advantage
I
of the
just...
fact that we have interpreters and address you in English. I have translated some of my slides, but not quite all of them. So I'll just
Brent,
pull
can
that
you
up. Hopefully you
hold
are
up just a little
seeing my
bit?
presentation now. And
Claro, no me gusta.
I was asked to focus on...
Vamos con la presentación de Brent y
Sure.
después miramos lo del video, Augusto. Yeah, go ahead, Brent. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Should I stop sharing?
Hay un poco de delay, pero todo bien. No, continúa, Brent.
Okay. Okay, no problem. So I was asked to talk a little bit about Target 3 and also including in relation to Target 10. Describe some of the global guidance and tools that the World Commission on Protected Areas has and is developing, and then a little bit about some of our other activities and partnerships all towards Target 3. As we all know, the Global Biodiversity Framework was agreed in December in Montreal, and it is quite complicated. There's a lot of focus on 30 by 30, of course, but we mustn't forget that that Target 3 is only one of 23 targets. All of them relate to Target 3 to a greater or lesser extent. Some of them instruct the target in terms of how to embrace traditional knowledge, equity, and that sort of thing, things that are touched on in the target language itself, but elaborated more in the other targets. So the main lesson is, we can't over-focus on one target to the exclusion of the others. And also that Target 3 does include a reference to sustainable use where appropriate, and still figuring out exactly what that means. But the main point that I want to stress is that there is another target for areas that are mainly for use, and whatever sustainable may be agreed, that's open to a lot of interpretation. So in the main, areas that we would consider sustainable use should be treated under Target 10 and not under Target 3. Of course, that's there's a lot underneath that, but that's the main point. I think you have all seen the target and are familiar with it. It is it would give a teacher of grammar nightmares. It's a huge, long sentence, very complicated. And one of the things that we're trying to do right now is just to try to make it a little less complicated and a little easier to grasp for those who do not have the luxury of spending as much time on it as some of us may. One of the first things we're trying to do, there are a lot of terms in here that are well defined and well described and codified. There are a lot of others that are not, and there's a lot of confusion even about some of the ones that that do have a strict definition approved either by the Convention on Biological Diversity or IUCN or others. So we are trying to sort that out. We put together a task force to really look at the growing proliferation of names for area-based conservation and how they overlap, and how they relate to each other. I liken it to the work that the Commission did some years ago that resulted in the protected area management categories that probably all of you are all familiar with. We're also working with the Global Environment Facility through WWF, developing a guide to Target 3, particularly on aspects of being inclusive, equitable, and effective. This has been a very open process. I know many of you have been involved in some of our consultations and discussions. It's meant to be very practical, very accessible, highly graphical, and as some of you may know, it's out for review now. And again, we're trying to break down this complicated target in ways that are easier to understand. This may be a little hard to read. It's just a concept of one of the infographics that we will share in the guide, but really focusing on what are the different components and how do you put them all together. Some decision trees on how do you differentiate, for example, between a protected area and an OECM. What are some of the things that you have to think about? Again, trying to map this out for folks who aren't as familiar with the target as we all are. And of course, introduced in the target is the recognizing indigenous and traditional territories, and still good deal of work to figure out exactly what that means in terms of recognizing in the target. It isn't listed in quite the same way that protected areas and OECMs are, and eventually the CBD will have to provide some further guidance, I think, on just exactly what does that mean. Is that a third pathway to reporting, or is it something else? There are a good number of different opinions on that, all valid. So there'll be a lot of discussion as to how to move forward on that in a way that's productive and equitable to all. As I mentioned, the draft language for the guide, just the text, is out for wide open review. Anyone who wants to have a look at it may. And if you haven't seen it, let me know and I can send it to you. It is available only in English, I'm afraid, because some of the language, particularly around indigenous issues and equity, is very nuanced. We didn't want to quickly translate it and make some mistakes. So ultimately, the guide will be available at least in Spanish and French, but for now, the draft is in English. People are welcome to sort of machine translate it on their own, but we didn't want to put out an official version and cause confusion because we're working on it very, very quickly, as you might imagine. We do recognize that we won't be able to fit everything into a guide that we are mandated to keep to 60 pages. So in a parallel process, we're developing an online toolkit, tentatively called 30 by 30 Solutions. This is a project that's being personed by the Nature Conservancy. They'll have staff working on this through 2030. And this will give us a place to curate a lot more information and guidance. We're hoping to build it in such a way that it can get to people at whatever level of information they want, from just quickly grasping central concepts to really drilling down to more detail. The current website is just really a brochure, but we are starting to build that out. The person who will be leading on that is just coming online now. And we have high hopes for this to be a resource for everyone. And we will be putting sort of high-level guidance in there in a way that can be very easily translated. And it looks like this will become an official knowledge platform for the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. I imagine you're all familiar with that. It's a voluntary coalition of well over 100 parties to the convention, and it will be freely available to anyone who wants to access it, but it will give us a good profile being connected to the HAC 2.0, which is really about implementation. The HAC membership is limited to governments. So another thing that we're doing with the commission, we're co-hosting with the Secretariat of the CBD a Target 3 partnership. This is bringing together not only parties to the convention, but also NGOs, philanthropic donors, multilateral donors, bilateral donors, like from Germany and elsewhere, and really focusing on assistance to implementation and aligning all of the efforts that are going on. We met first at the COP15, and we are setting up to have a group of about 80 meet in June to further that work. Another thing the commission is trying to work on so far, it's mostly just identifying the need, but if you're not familiar with this study led by another vice chair, Mike Appleton, basically documents what we all know intuitively, that we are woefully understaffed to manage a third of the planet, and we need to address that. One specific tool that is being developed or really redeveloped is a site level assessment for OECMs. Obviously, that's a hot topic. Some of you may have seen the first version. It's now being revised and given experience, and it will be coming out. It's going to the design phase right now, so it should be coming out in May. That will be translated to Spanish for sure, hopefully Portuguese. I'm not certain about that, so that will be coming along, as well as a rewrite of the OECM guidelines, which is well underway. I don't have a release date on that yet, but it's coming up soon. And getting towards the end here, one thing we're trying to stress through all of this guidance is that, yes, it's 30%, but quality is as or more important than quantity. There's a lot in the target about making the existing 16, 17% really effective. We don't want to lose that. To cite an extreme example, particularly with OECMs, this is a green space, but it's not a conserved area. We want to avoid, in a rush to counting, that we count things that don't really address the core issue that we all care so much about, is reversing this decline. And a lot of the work that we're trying to do in clarifying guidance and interpretation of the target is now being directed to what's coming up amazingly quickly for all of us who were at COP15, a next COP, which will be sometime in 2024 in Turkey. And that will be an opportunity to clarify a lot of questions in terms of how to interpret that. So I think that's quite enough for me. A little over my time, actually. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to you.
Muchísimas gracias a ti, Brent.
Thank you so much, Brent, because have given us like a comprehensive frame, very wide, to start this dialogue. Yes, it's very important that if we want to talk about something in a...
¿Estamos sin audio? ¿No me escucha?
Sí, sí, te escuchamos, querida.
Ya, ok, perfecto. Como decía, si queremos hablar...
If we want to speak a common language, it's important to observe what do we have and how are we interpreting those tools. That in one hand, and then now on, I want to give the space and make a question to a colleague and friend, very special for us, that has been accompanying us since the higher level in the global area, which is our president, adjunct president, that used to work vis-a-vis with with our president of the commission, Andrew Rhodes. Welcome, welcome, and thank you so much for the support our region and to continue going out on this ladder of knowledge from a global point of view, but also landing on all the ideas of how we can work in or these protected areas, how we can be a companion for all the areas to provide tools that can be important for them to continue divide all the different objectives that are helpful for them. Not only our adjunct president, in this moment, he is also Susherpa, the high-level panel for the in the Secretariat of International Relationships. He's also, it will be the National Commissioner for Protected Areas in Mexico. So he has a very wide experience in just and governance, and which is this country that is Mexico, and he has been articulated for so many years a whole bunch of work in terms of finances and protected areas and preservations and different initiatives that are related with these conversations. Andrew, Brent already gave us not only the vision, the complete vision that this signifies the goal or the target number 3 about diversity. So we start also to see the starts the difficulty about interpretation, about different aspects. And therefore, I want to ask you, and also because our guests can understand, can ask their own questions and create their own reflections. What are the opportunities to identify, provoke, and recognize the different territories and their giveaway to the target number 3? In the same sense, I also wanted to ask you, please tell us what will be the role that you play the platform 30 by 30 for Latin America and the Caribbean that is being developed in this sense, for obviously for the complexion of the goal and the target. We had the space. Thank you, Paula. Sorry, breaking up. It's such a pleasure of being here. I have seen in the chat, you can all share valuable links that can complement your work for collaboration, communications, how we can fulfill the process to connect different concepts. Thank you, Brent, that you are connected today here with us in the region, Latin America and the Caribbean, and the global point of view is fundamental for us. Thank you. Paula, thank you to organizing this session. I'm so glad to be here. I'm going to try to respond these 2 questions, not only before to understand our beloved Kathy McKinnon. For all of you that have met her, she was the president of the Commission of the Protected Areas for so many years. She dedicated her life to the agenda of the conservation of biodiversity. She left us. She went ahead of us, and we wanted to take a moment to remember her and honor her So you can see these images. She can see us through Zoom from the other world. So take this moment for her. So going back to the question right now, and the conversation with Brent in a regional area and between Latin America and the Caribbean have been advanced in a particular way and different experiences. Heterogeneous activity of the LAC. It's also good to mention here's the conjunction. There is a few historic processes of the protected areas in Latin America and the Caribbean. I am referring to different congresses and conferences that have been advancing among the time that we have been making systems, resolutions, declarations. We have been gathering all that data. You can see on the presentation a resume of all these processes. Like Brent was saying, all the protected areas was growing so fast. We all remember the target 11, and we wanted to protect the 17% of all the territorial areas and also on the marine areas. If we advance on those terms, there has been other elements of the famous goals that we left in that one. Effectiveness of management, representation, how were we representing those territories of biodiversity and the landscaping, and we have progress a lot now with this global frame adopted in with this target number 3 is opportunity to reflect mostly what was that we did not incorporate it, what is that we left behind in the target 11, and how can we work on it and this new opportunity. So it'll open a very interesting way to start this conversation. And mentioned it before, Paula, and all of you have participated in different congresses, this new concept, well, new quote unquote, and and different techniques of preservations that have been started like they fly and high very fast, but it's also important to be careful in the different seminaries and congress that we have been participate maybe the last 2 years. We realized that a lot of the participants that the glance was only concentrated on expansion. Yeah. So the necessity, a mechanism of collaboration and mostly in capacities, regional initiatives that help in an integral way, justly to bring all the qualitative aspects of it. We have talked along the way that there's a risk to advance in a very fast way, but like Brent was mentioning, it doesn't have a lot of importance if it's not going to be relevant if we don't do it in the particular areas with the particular people. Not all of them are protected areas, and also different types of governance that they have and different elements that contribute in the effectiveness of the preservation of the areas, and other concepts that it can be in the target 3 that we have noted that new concepts that show up. The necessity to generate spaces of collaboration, exchange of information, initiatives, and the platform 30 by 30, which is for the World Organization of Protected Areas, and the region. It is a space that we can interact and share these experiences. And the best complementation, what are the best practices? And the global platforms. And so to resume, basically the region bring to the table the conclusion of the global initiatives from the global to regional and from regional to global. We know that this is only the addition of regions. There's a few regions that have been added to this point of view, to the global view, that we do this exercise, this mechanism to overview all this data. And very important to highlight, Paula, The platform, it does not substitute any other initiatives have existed already in the region. Therefore, what it looks is to find those initiatives that already exist, projects, organizations, and even from the government, to find a place to have conversations. It doesn't substitute them. This is a platform to create capacities and generate conversations. The goal or target number 3 is the target that we all have. We all have nightmares, right? There are days that I don't sleep very well, and the days that I don't sleep normally are related with the knowledge of areas of the conservation of protected areas that not necessarily contribute in an integral way to this project, and sometimes they generate more problems than benefits. So I invite all the participants that together we promote the complement and the fulfillment of the target number 3, then a strictly integral way. And then Paula, and if anyways, I am here available for any question or comments. This is the first seminary from a lot of those that are going to come along after this one. And moving forward, we're going to share links of interests, more information so they can continue in touch with us for this contribution. Thank you and good morning. Thank you very much, Andrew. Okay, you gave us a few invitations, and all of those we're going to pay attention to them. I appreciate it so much. There are some words from the co-leadership of the commission that complements what you just said. I will invite everyone to be shared at this moment, because we have a lot of participation and we need inspiration, yeah, to continue going along this path you're inviting us to go. It can place the words of Madhu Bravo, our president, and then we continue.
Warm greetings to all of you. With this message, I would like to applaud the important objectives of this workshop series, appropriately termed Tenemos que Hablar. We are at a crucial time to reverse declines in biodiversity. With 8 years left to 2030, it is time to focus all our energies on the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework. OECMs represent a unique opportunity to recognize and support conservation outcomes in areas beyond formally protected areas. However, it is critically important to ensure that we all speak the same language when it comes to their implementation. I believe this workshop and the initiative is therefore an important step in that process in the LAC region. From the World Commission on Protected Areas, I thank all our partners, Red Parkes, Rewild, Universidad para la Cooperación Internacional, and others for their commitment to this. Thank you very much.
Excelente. Bueno, Madu no está aquí con nosotros, dado que prácticamente es la medianoche, ¿no? Para ella ya en este momento, pero nos ha estado también apoyando muchísimo y acompañando en toda esta esfuerzo, ¿no? Es un gran esfuerzo que también estamos haciendo para que tenga mucho sentido que también como comisión sigamos articulándonos y dialogando. En este sentido, y creo que también es muy importante no solo el tener en cuenta cómo se interpretan los diferentes conceptos, sino también hay algo que es clave dentro de toda nuestra, digámoslo así, compromiso internacional, y es el tema del reporte. Es fundamental que podamos hacer un seguimiento específico sobre lo que estamos haciendo, sobre cómo lo estamos haciendo, cuáles son nuestras fortalezas, también aquello que identificamos que son nuestras debilidades, y por supuesto que es en lo que tenemos que trabajar y movilizar los diferentes actores recordar que no podemos solos en este trabajo y que es
We
importante.
cannot continue at this work by ourselves. It's so important to recognize all these different shares, and we can see it as a big picture when we have reports and ways to give away to others the data of the work that we have been doing. That's the particular effort that the region has been working on, like maybe 3 years ago since we started with a different group of organizations and conversations, and that you have seen through our regional congress of the protected areas for the benefits of version number 3 in Lima 2019. And then you see it particularly in the paper, and so, and that you can see at the inform of Protected Planet in the version of America Latina. So in relationship to 2020, this report, we're going to talk about it, but also I want to highlight that is a report that not a lot of regions have been able to do it. Only 2 regions in a global area have been able to do it. So precisely this helps us to have this instrument of transference and to provide rendition of the different factors we have used, and to also to share data, and also allow us to continue identifying what are the priorities at work. So I want to give the word to Monica Alvarez. I want to ask to Monica, I'm going to introduce her. Monica right now is the defender. She's one of our heroes right now. Currently, she's the development officer of the International Federation of Park Rangers. She is Mexican and lives in Mexico City. And she's also, she participates as an alternate representative of the steering committee of the Universal Ranger Support Alliance, the URSA. And her work is focused on the strengthening the Federation initiatives and supporting the recognition of rangers worldwide. And her focal point is the IUCN World Commission of the Protected Areas in Mexico. And she is the right person to tell us how has been working on the development, and what is it that we see in that picture of the reports, and also to reflect what are the challenges that she has been facing, and also in the work to create those reports. How can we gather better the data? This is not the only report that has been generated at the region. There's a lot of different efforts, and like in Bariloche, and the follow-up that it was done from Bariloche to Lima Congress. But also we have to continue how we consolidate and what are the challenges in order to implement more work to the goal in a transparency in order to be able to fulfill our goals. So Monica, I left this question for you, and I appreciate what you're going to share with us. Thank you very much, Paula. And presentation, my presentation is very short. Chat. All the participants can download the inform that is in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Actually, right now, like Paula can see here, I'm just going to give you a very important, with this whole presentations, give a lot of reflections for this target 3 and the other global targets in the global frame. It will be an addition of different efforts from different organizations and people and volunteers. We thank all the authors of this work. There was more 58 authors that participate and more than 40 organizations. And yes, it was pitched 2 years ago, but all this information that protected areas, so July 2020, all the different areas provide a lot of richness. So,
Caribe, y como bien decía Paula, se encuentran fortalezas, debilidades.
like Paula was saying, and it was a lot of reflection to make this cut, to see what can you consider for the next goals that I'm going to focus right now to talk to you all?
A nivel de cobertura, ¿cómo se llegó, no? Que creo que es la parte, como decía Brent y también comentaba Andrew, que siempre, pues, llegamos bien, ¿no? O sea, se reportaron en el informe 9,154 áreas protegidas en la región. Ahí es nada más para que vean el mapa, cómo se ven distribuidas estas áreas terrestres en verde, las áreas protegidas marinas y costeras en azul. Y aquí esta lámina es importante nada más para que vean la tendencia en el progreso, ¿no? Se puede ver la línea verde, que es las áreas terrestres, llegamos al 24% de territorio protegido cuando la meta estipulaba el 17%, se ve una tendencia como el crecimiento más constante. Y pueden ver en la línea azul, que son las áreas marinas, donde la meta era el 10%, pues como los últimos 5 años hubo un incremento enorme, ¿no? En esta tendencia de decretar áreas marinas, sobre todo áreas marinas muy grandes, de áreas marinas protegidas. Entonces también eso nos dice mucho, ¿no? Nos dice mucho que quizá al final también hubo una intención de cumplir la meta de los países y pues obviamente cobertura pues es una forma de hacerlo.
And obviously this is something that was excellent. It's wonderful that we have exceeded the goal in terms of coverage, and it gives us a flavor of seeing these qualitative ingredients that do not take us as far as the terrestrial areas, but there are other authors within the participants of the session that precisely in these other components is where we have the main challenges. I'm going to tell you some data about each one of them. In the part of key areas for the diversity, or the key biodiversity areas, we know that there are 2,300 areas in Latin America and the Caribbean, at least at the moment in which this report was made. But nevertheless, 43.8% of these VAs do not have any degree of protection under the figure of protected areas. So this is an alert of what is happening with this, of VAs that do not have any type of acknowledgement of protection by protected area. The same thing happens with biological diversity. We have the region, like Latin America and the Caribbean, the most diverse area in the world, but nevertheless, only the half of the biomas in Latin America exceed or reach 17% protection. This means that there are many biomass, for example, the Mediterranean templated forests that are subrepresented in terms of protection. Another very important that is going to go into more detail today is the topic of effectiveness in management. The goal is 17, the AP, of evaluating the effectiveness. According to the database, the World Database, only 13.7% of the protected areas of Latin America have been evaluated under some methodology. Here, it is important to mention because there is a great job of the effectiveness team that carried out this chapter, because we also noticed that there are many other methodologies that are made at a national level in a documented and systematic manner, but nevertheless, these are methodologies that are proper to the countries. So a very important data for the next goals is how these standards are measured, how to measure the effectiveness in a more generalized manner. Also, in terms of connectivity, there's a very, very big challenge. You can see it in the map. Out of the 51 countries and the territories that have been studied,
se mantiene como islas de conservación. Entonces, estos componentes nos dicen que es donde nos tenemos que enfocar también en los siguientes 10 años. Gobernanza. Como pueden ver rápidamente en la pantalla, la mayoría de la gobernanza reportada son gobiernos, ¿no? Gobiernos a diferentes niveles, arriba casi el 60%, pero hay un juego de actores importantísimos que son los privados, las comunicaciones.
That is protected and connected, which is important. Only 1/3 part of the total protected area is
gobernanza que suelen ser
with the goal of conservation. These components tell us that this is where we have to focus also in the next 10 years. Governance. Very punctually on the screen, the majority of the governance that has been reported are governments, and the governance that were to say which are these stakeholders, the local governments, for example. The best estimate that I have in the condition of the report is that 20% of these protected areas.
Avanzando. Los territorios de vida que son críticos, y ya hablarán también, o ticas, ¿no? Que tenemos en la región al menos 3,000 ticas o territorios indígenas que están resguardados por comunidades locales e indígenas que también suelen estar muy subrepresentados.
Indigenous communities that are also misrepresented and that are stakeholders that are fundamental in this new goal. The private areas. We estimate that we have 4,000 private areas in Latin America. At the moment in which the report was made, that the size is equivalent to the size of Costa Rica, but there's also a sub-representation that is important, and a very important representation of the private areas in the hands of private people, private enterprises, communities. Mexico depends, of course, of the tenants in each one of the countries. How do we come in terms of the MEC? That's also something that's going to be mentioned further ahead. When we did the report, no country had reported the MEC. It had not been reported, and there was a country that reported one, and about 9, it says it had come to elaborate a route, but it had not been reported. No OMEC had been reported for that moment. And just to wrap up, other very important challenges we have as a product of the report that it is important to take into account, that Andrew Brett has already mentioned, is the topic of the favorable conditions and environments. We can talk about expansion now with a much more ambitious goal, but the how is very important. We know that the systems of protected areas are very much limited in budget. We need other stakeholders to strengthen other stakeholders and also the staff. And here I cannot avoid putting myself on the side of the park rangers. 84% of the park rangers of Latin America say that they perceive that their work is very dangerous, but nevertheless, 98% of them feel very proud about it. When we did this exercise of the report, it was estimated that we only accounted for park rangers of government systems without taking into account the others. But so that you might have an idea, one park ranger on an average for 50,000, 320,000 square kilometers. So in summary, this report leaves us a lot. It tells us that in terms of coverage, we are advancing very well. We can see the trends, but there is a lot of work to be done. A lot of work in all the qualitative components that Andrew and Brett have already mentioned in terms of effectiveness, governance, division, representativity, connectivity, etc., and conditions also. So I invite you. I have left you there in the chat the access to the report in English, Portuguese, and Spanish, and also the article that Brett mentioned. It was the most recent that we have in regard to the how much staff and park rangers we need for these new goal number 3, and we need to improve it in at least 5 times what we have, and those that we have to improve their conditions. So obviously we need more staff, and by park rangers we refer to all the community vigilance and all these people that are in the territory defending those protected areas and parks. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Sorry that I did it so fast because it's many of us that we're going to present. So any doubt you have my contact and you can see it in my report. Thank you. And as you did, it was a massive effort to be able to conclude in this manner. It's so harmoniously. And thank you very much, and Monica, for having led this job, and especially for being in this moment doing, as we said in the beginning, that defense of the stakeholders that are really the most important ones, undoubtedly, in the world of conservation, which are precisely our park rangers and the people that are there in that stage. That the Commission really can do much more for them. Of course, we have a very limited mandate, but we have spoken a lot and many opportunities about the ways in which we can really position these messages and take that idea of how much is necessary to be able to have an effective conservation. That it's not only about tools, that it's not only about reporting, but it's also about doing on the land. And with that, I would like to give way to a small reflection. And please forgive me that it's me at this moment, the one who is going to put 2 hats on, but I simply want to go on to the elements that are a little more specific within the goal. And I would like to begin talking about the topic of effective and equitable governance. Andrew and Brett also did this in the beginning of the conversation, of how these elements have been present, even in commitments, previous commitments. And well, thanks to the great inspiration that we had from the World Congress in Durban, where we even had the President Mandela participating in South Africa, and that every day we have been taking more strength in being able to acknowledge that effective conservation cannot be effective if we do not recognize that we also have many other stakeholders that have a very important participation on the land. And when I talk about the land, I'm also involving the marine territories. If you're going to go on to the next, please. Thank you. And just to expand a little bit my presentation, as I said in the beginning of this conference call, I am at this moment the regional vice president for the South America for the Commission. I have also worked and I play at this moment a part in the committee of the directory of the marine matters of the Commission, and I work at this moment with International Conservancy in the Division of the Americas and also in protection and governance. In other words, this leads me to think precisely about this very spectacular element, which is the one of governance, and how we should really break down the governance. And that is something that is very important. This is where this message leads us. We don't have an absolute truth. Not everything is black and white. We have to be able to have interpretation that in the framework of equalness will allow us to reach conclusions that will be interpreted very easily by everybody, but that might contain that particular detail that make diversity in terms of governance will be something that reflects its quality. And I would just like to stop for a couple of minutes because what we are also really promoting and reflecting on is of the functions. I mean, why a good governance? Why a governance that is solid in terms of generating some principles, of binding to some principles that might be many or might be few, but in reality we have to have clarity. And apart from that, we are also doing reference to a series of type of governance. What they do is to acknowledge that voice, the roles that stakeholders have, and that is a key element. And it's really an element that is going to be completely fundamental to be able to have an adequate management of the protected and conserved areas that will lead us to the objectives of conservation. So in this sense, I would just like to make a few clarifications and to say that in this acknowledgement of who are the ones that make the decisions in the territories, who are the ones that carry out the strategies that we are proposing further on, that precisely Sandra is going to talk to us about the topic of how to measure them. It is fundamental, precisely also, so that we can understand how conservation is being done in different territories. We are at this moment facing a reality that presents efforts that end up in conservation without its main objective to be conservation. But it is also important to acknowledge them under certain parameters, under a quality of that governance in terms of being able to say, okay, ready. We are binding to some principles. There are some benefits within the protected areas or the management of those protected areas. And it is important then to acknowledge them. It is important in as much as we always take into account that there are rights that are involved beyond the rights of the conservation or the rights of the nature. There are also activities that take us to think that there are stakeholders like the private stakeholders or the companies or the enterprises that are making a very important contribution to the conservation beyond their mandate on its own, and that it is also important to incorporate them within these numbers as we saw them now in the report, to make them every day more visible of what are those preservation profiles. Once again, there is not one single way of interpreting or of conceiving that type of quality of governance, based the role of our indigenous people and local communities that, as we all know, are custodians of the natural resources without having any external law or external indication coming to tell them how they have to be used, and that in reality we know that they end up in conservation. So in the following slide, to wrap up, just to bear in mind that this message that I'm going to give you, and it's very interesting, if you could give click to that again, that we need to learn to really learn and capitalize on a series of trainings in terms of this acknowledgement also, so that we might be able to uh, achieve this that has been conceived from the biological point of the element of the complete. This is not only in terms of the ecological representativity, but also in the representation of the stakeholders. And this is where we relate these topics of the type of governance that is promoted by the IUCN, but that it is important to go beyond that, what is conserved. We have to apply topic of what could be considered the adequate scheme doesn't exist. There are many different schemes that we have, and we have to go on beyond that and to identify how those schemes and their principles of operation lead up to effective conservation as a result. That is looking for greater equity in the conservation. This is the message that I want to leave to you. Also, to give way at this moment so that Sandra might be able to help us land more with her great experience, and especially at this moment with her co-leadership of the group for the effective management and of the green list. To make, and I take this opportunity to make a small introduction of Sandra. Sandra Valenzuela is the director, the executive director of the UT Colombia. Sandra, just like me, has dedicated a large part of her life to the conservation of national parks in Colombia. And Sandra also has many years working in stratification and the measurement of effectiveness of management, not only in Colombia, but also in many countries of the region, in the Amazon region. And apart from that, Sandra has a pre-grad in law and a post-grad in environmental law. And she has dedicated her whole life precisely to this matter of conservation in the system. So Sandra is going to help us guide and reflect on the things regarding the topic of effectiveness. And in that sense, I want to add to the fact that this reflection that Sandra is going to make, and that we have been talking with the authorities of the management to visualize the results of conservation. But how do you think, or what tools do you think that at this moment are being offered to us by the developments that exist by both by the commission and by others, and that might be able to help us in this visualization? So thank you very much, Sandra. I give you now the floor.
Muchísimas gracias, Paula, por tan
Thank you very much,
honorable
Paula, for such an
presentación. Muchas
honorable
gracias.
presentation of my person.
Muchísimas gracias por estar en este espacio
Honestly, thank you for allow me to be in this
y
space.
como conversar con
And
las dos,
as we mentioned,
conversar, valga la redundancia,
and to
del
talk,
tema y de la
sorry,
importancia de
about
poder
the topic, and
medir, ¿no? Tenemos un
to be able to reach
objetivo
the goal
para
number
la
3.
meta de Comú
We have a
mundial.
guiding line
Veo que
that leads us to this, and I think that advancing
sí, las mismas metas Aichi,
in the
una de
view of the
ellas
same of the goals themselves were one of the main
un
goals
manejo efectivo,
uh,
nos
that gives
decía
us all the effective management.
que el X% de áreas protegidas.
It says that it covers only X% of protected areas,
Ellos
and that they were
establecerían
going to
un
present
criterio,
measurements there for their management, but it never gave us a guiding
un
star
nivel mínimo de
as to the
efectividad
minimum level of effectiveness in the management,
y eficacia y cómo
and
realmente,
how
como llamamos en inglés,
do we
medir
really have, like we say in English, a benchmark,
realmente para qué son las
and
cosas. Y
how
entonces,
can we do it
esto
to
ha
measure it?
ido generando
So this has been generating, as you were
el
saying,
Congreso anterior
from the
que hizo
previous
en
Congress,
Australia.
and even from Australia when we started launching the green list as a pilot. So now we, along with Mark Hoppins, who managed the effective agreement, a group as well as the convention, well, we gave ourselves the task of mapping the different instruments that we have in the different regions to be able to measure the effectiveness of the management. That everything is complemented based on the framework that we have for the convention, but some of them give us more elements than others. So within this group, we're going to have an element or a cluster of members of the commission who are volunteers, where we have been talking about them with them about different topics that allow us to integrate and to bring all the instruments for an effective management. In the region, in our region in Latin America, this is where we have our greater participation in the first sessions that we have had to be able to diagnose this. And we have different instruments for the management of different type that become a referral, not only for Latin America, but also for the rest of the regions. And we can start sharing, and we have instruments that talk about the protected areas of the public, the national, the regional, and the local, at the community level, private protection areas, instruments for the management and the analysis of effective management of Amazon areas, where we can, with which we share common resources. So we have a challenge that is super interesting, where in this group, we're going to start sharing all these type of instruments and promoting that not only should we generate those measurements, but that in the action plans of biodiversity based on Montreal and the different countries, we should start generating those benchmarks. How should the effectiveness of the protected areas, the public-private areas, the community areas, the reserves of the civil society, and so on and so forth. And how are we going to start monitoring the other strategies for the preservation? So there we're going to be working with Clara Matallana, who is one of our leaders in the topic of how to start generating these type of not only the instruments that are already there, but also how to start generating those guiding stars and to see what effectiveness we have to reach. And that joins another topic that is also very important, which is the green list. The green list is compliance with the minimum standards to be able to have the areas that comply with their vision, which is effectiveness in the management. So what we have also advanced on in our region is the constitution of the committees for the green list, the establishment of the indicators that is provided to us by the Global Commission to our countries, and in addition, to start really making the analysis and the trends of how we are complying with the standards of management. In other words, what levels of effectiveness in the management. And there we can continue on advancing to what we're going to understand for a level of management using the green list that is functional, or in other words, the basic, or an effectiveness in the management that is structural, to really be able to comply, as we call it, to have a better result or outcome. And there we are coordinating with Mit and Paola in the group that we have, so that we might be able to determine and tell the people what we are going to understand by those outcomes, articulated as effectiveness in the management of how we're going to comply by implementing all the standards and all the topics related to the livelihood of this, and to start really measuring how at the impact level the areas are complying and are in compliance, sorry. So for me, the summoning, and we are now present in different countries of the region, particularly starting to have an update or a development of the plans for the action and presentation of plans, what we call the kickoff in English. And there we can start disseminating that instrumentation of how we're going to measure the effectiveness. So we're going to start generating what is going to be those levels of indicators or the minimums that we want to generate effectiveness in the management. And as I say, to structure structural or functional, depending on the type of areas that we are talking about, and the integration of systems and subsystems of the areas, so that we might be able to really be able to have in reporting those action plans at what level, both at a country level, but also at the level of subregions, the Amazon, the Pacific, the Caribbean, the Patagonia, what kind of effectiveness we're having in regard to the surrounding areas that we have been having. And I think that in our region is very well prepared, and you're going to be listening to from us in this group. We are organizing like all the input that we have received to be able to generate some focus groups, and we share only the instruments and the good practices, but also how are we measuring and seeing this benchmark of the indicators, and how we should really try to reach an effectiveness in the management as it is requested to us by the goal number 3. We thank you very much. All these reflections, Sandra. I think that we are precisely packaging this that you are mentioning, all the indications that we have been doing throughout the webinars. And it is precisely to give a step further on to strengthen also the matter related of reports and the evidence that will lead us to reflect as to what is it that we need. Is there something in this world of conservation? There's something in this world of conservation in which we know that not everything is perfect, not everything ends as we had planned it. When we determine a protected area, now that we have these other measurements of conservation, we have a very big challenge to identify precisely what it is that we want to do. And everything that you are mentioning is leading us precisely to think of how can we make this tool, make this with the tools that we have. Thank you very much for that. And now, we also based on what you know, and to lead us to think and to go beyond the national borders, talking about the different subregions and how we have been working on and boarding this observation at a regional level. I would like to invite a colleague, a very dear, very estimated colleague that everybody will be able to recognize, particularly because of his leadership within the organization in the fourth Congress of Marine Protected Areas in Chile a few years ago, 6 years ago precisely. We are going to celebrate the creation of this organization, and it's our colleague Felipe Paredes, who today, also coming from a region, is leading us at a global level in the marine topic of the World Commission on Protected Areas. Felipe, apart from this, as I am commenting, he is the coordinator of the marine protected areas within the Ministry of the Environment in Chile, and he has a great experience in the management of allocation of such complex areas like, for example, the areas that we have in the Rapa Nui and all of our distant Pacific, let's say, to call it somehow, and all the Chilean Patagonia, and that at this moment is being led wonderfully by this in this topic globally, and we really appreciate the fact that he is here with us to share with us a series of reflections, particularly, especially in the decade that we are in right now. Felipe, you know, and you can comment this. Why is it important at this moment also to see very specifically and very especially the marine, taking into account that we have a new global goal, but we also have some new instruments that help us to think about marine biodiversity, not only divided by national borders, but also by 2/3 of our planet are covered by marine areas or marine zones that have a diversity that is immense. So I would like to ask you precisely, in view of these new developments, why Specifically, do you consider that we have to reinforce those those jobs from the organisms advisors in political sciences, like for example, the Commission of Protected Areas, so that we might be able to support the development of goals as important as the goal number 3 from the point of view of conservation, that we might be able to reach that 30 by 30 that we have committed to worldwide. So I thank you very much. And now the floor is yours. And here we have Felipe Paredes with us. Hello, hello, Paula. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm really very happy to be participating in this first webinar or workshop regarding the goal number 3, that, as it has been stated, it implies a tremendous effort, a tremendous responsibility. We have the great challenge of protecting 1/3 of the total surface of the planet. So, and also with a sense of urgency, we have a horizon to 2030. We have certain 7 and a little bit less than that years ahead of us. So we have to feel that responsibility and based on that, act as fast as possible. And also as a great ecosystem, the ocean, as you said, this covers a great part of this blue planet. And also with the complexity that the ocean has for protecting, protection forces us to work and collaborate and to find synergies to be able to protect 1/3 of this ocean. Mathematically, protect 1/3 of 70% of the planet. 75% of the planet is a tremendous territory, a tremendous territory that we have to protect. And that not only we're talking about the quantity, this 30% that we have to protect, but also how do we protect the quality of the protection. The quality of this conservation is something that has to be representative. As you said, Paula, it also has to be done with the principles of good governance. This 30%, at least 30% of the ocean, it cannot be done in any way. We have to respect the communities that are seeking and that inhabit these oceans. We have to also protect it in a representative manner, preserving 30% of different marine ecosystems, coastal zones, the mangroves, the coral reefs, the cold areas, Antarctic regions. All these different ecosystems have to be protected. And also the opportunity that it means to protect also with some other effective measures like which are the OMEC, which are to represent another opportunity. Now, how do we have to protect this ocean? What science tells us is that we have to maximize the effort of conservation, and they have identified 2 great environments, let's say, of marine protected areas that are important to be able to have better benefits. One of them would be the level of conservation, or protection, sorry. The science tells us that the higher level of protection, those that are highly protected, the human use, they basically are restricted or forbidden in some of the zones, and these will give us greater benefits. And on the other hand, since we are in this, as we can see in this diagram, the level of management, how much we take charge and how much we become responsible of these marine protected areas also gives us more benefits. The protected areas that are high on the right, on the top of to the right, that are highly protected and that are actively managed with budgets, with financing, with the staff, with the human teams, with capacities to be able to buy boats and be able to inspect it and so forth, are the ones that are going to give us the best return, understood as a human benefit in the long run to the societies. The next slide, please. And well, it's true that we have talked a lot about this global agreement that was approved in Montreal in December. But we also have good news in regard to conservation of the sea of the seas, because recently we had an agreement or a treaty to protect and to take charge as a humanity of the waters of the deep sea. There is now a possible solution of protecting a 30% of the ocean if we don't protect the high seas. Only 6% of the oceans are under the territorial jurisdiction, but the other 27% we have to collaborate with the parties, the different countries. And this puts a very important challenge ahead of us. We have experienced in protected marine areas in cooperation in areas that are under national jurisdictions in Latin America, but nevertheless, everything that is done in the Caribbean, of course, in the Southeast tropical corridor, Panama, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, working jointly to protect these areas. And these models of cooperation of the different parties also has to be projected to what is going to be the high seas. And in this treaty of the high seas, one of the most important points is precisely the measures of conservation based on area, and particularly the marine protected areas. That's regarding the seas, and I'm happy to be able to answer any question at the end of the webinar. Thank you very much, Paula. Thank you very much for putting us to swim also. Thank you very much once again for pointing out the importance of the marine protected areas for the conservation and all these tools that at this moment we have. And precisely, and that is why we wanted to board this seminar, webinar in this manner. We see that great ecosystems and great biomasses, such as the marine, oceanic protected areas, are a result of an ecological process that we are also proposing in these global goals to be measured through the connectivity in the different areas. So the conservation of the seas would not be possible if there were not that connectivity between the sites, between the different initiatives, but especially the tools for the management based, that could be our marine protected areas, the forest protected areas, that can consolidate much broader spaces for conservation, where we can also take into consideration sustainability of the territory beyond the conservation as the primary objective. In this sense, then, we have wanted to invite a colleague also that is very dear and special to us, who works very strongly with our vice president, the global vice president, for a program of the line of connectivity, the CalPower. And at this moment, it is being represented by Aaron Lowen. I'm not sure of how your last name is pronounced, but please correct me. And now that I do the presentation, well, Aaron is at this moment managing the program of international connectivity that is also connected to the regional group of work of the IUCN specialist, but he also has basin on a center of experience and science in the United States, and Aaron has also been participating in all the advisory that is taking place through the Commission as a special advisor to the issues of environmental law. So here we are putting several of the needs that we have being brought together in the multidimensional focuses that is required by the protected areas, particularly in this topic of connectivity of the ecosystems and broader territories beyond those of the protected areas. So I want to invite Aaron also, so that he can talk to us a little bit about how can we land this, what suggestions would he give us once we have gone through all these elements that we have pointed out of the list, the green list, so that through an effective connectivity, we can also have a better measurement of the connectivity, a result of conservation that go beyond the protected areas, and a governance that is effective both on land as well as on sea, and drinking waters, street waters also, that will reflect the need of having all our territories talking amongst them, independent of whatever the objective might be for each one of them independently. So with that, in that sense, I give the floor to Aaron so that he might be able to tell us a little bit about his point of view, and we really appreciate his time in this webinar. Aaron, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paula. Thanks for the invitation. It's wonderful to see so many people today at this meeting. As Paula said, I manage the International Connectivity Program at the Center for Large Landscape Conservation, and also operate the Connectivity Conservation Specialist Group under IUC and WCPA. The specialist group also has a number of working groups. One of them that I'd really like to point out to all of you is the Latin American and Caribbean Transport Working Group. It's actually a number of connectivity specialists, infrastructure ecologists, and many practitioners from multiple sectors working across your region. So I'll put the membership information into the chat after my presentation. So I'm really going to get into connectivity conservation for achieving the global biodiversity framework, and also specific things for 30 by 30. So I'd first like to point out that as part of the 4 overarching goals and 23 targets of the GBF, there's specific commitments to and ways to advance connectivity and landscape, seascape conservation. So specifically, goal A targets 1, 2, 3, especially related to 30 by 30. But we've also looked at the opportunities for what connectivity can do in target 12 related to blue and green spaces. And if you look at overall target 14 for the full integration of biodiversity, we are convinced that connectivity conservation is a tool to help achieve many of the goals and targets. So regarding target 3, we know that most of the protected and conserved areas on the planet are still not connected. And this great diagram here on the, or map on the right, points that out, that we still have so many isolated islands of protected areas, but we have lots of habitat in between, as was pointed out about all the key biodiversity areas in your region that still do not have any protection. So if we looked at some of the most recent estimates, yes, there's almost 17% of terrestrial and inland waters that are protected or conserved areas, but we're still far away from having met the well-connected aspects of what was Aichi Target 11 and is now Target 3 under the GBF. So terrestrial surface of the planet being protected and connected is only about 7.84% at this time. So I'm going to look specifically at the language in Target 3 that's related to areas being well connected and integrated into wider landscapes, seascapes, and the ocean. So when we talk about connectivity conservation, we're really talking about a countermeasure to the fragmentation and the architecture of large-scale conservation. So here's a number of examples of regions and countries and subnational initiatives that are already fulfilling or working towards fulfilling their commitments to have well-connected 30 by 30. And this is through the conservation of ecological networks in their countries and regions. It's the identification and the designation of ecological corridors that tie together the protected and conserved areas and build these ecological networks across landscapes and seascapes. So comprehensively, these large-scale approaches can better address existing and future commitments to area-based conservation and species conservation. I'm not going to point out all of the examples that are here, but I did want to draw your attention to the recent advances in Tanzania, where there was legislation passed in 2017 that was actually implemented over a number of years. And last year, Tanzania approved the Wildlife Corridor Assessment, Prioritization, and Action Plan. And it actually delineates 61 corridors, including 8 transboundary corridors that are important for wildlife movement between the targeted protected areas. And the next step that they're taking is actually to create corridor management plans for each one of those corridors, tying together the ecological network. So to guide the world towards more consistent approaches, we at the center and with the specialist group published IUCN guidelines for connectivity conservation starting in 2020. There is now a Spanish translation. We, in the meantime, have 6 translations that have been released. And even last week, I was talking to colleagues in Turkmenistan about the possibility of doing a Russian translation. So this publication provides the leading global definitions for ecological corridors and ecological networks, and how together they can better maintain and conserve biological diversity across intact and fragmented landscapes and seascapes. So I've included a conceptual diagram there in the bottom left. And based on these guidelines, we've also developed a workshop approach to help stakeholders to work through the details of designing, governing, and managing these ecological corridors and networks. So this approach was first piloted in 2019 in Romania. And the idea for the workshop is to produce specific sets of recommendations. And what we did in Romania was recommendations for 3 focal ecological corridors that could actually be deployed to all of the corridors across Romania. It was all reinforced by high quality field data, results from spatial and genetic and ecological analyses. And it did lead to the creation of a multi-stakeholder connectivity working group, really bringing together multiple sectors to discuss how could they better govern the overall ecological network for the country, but then also thinking wider for the region of the Carpathians. And last week, I was actually in Turkmenistan in Central Asia, and we conducted a workshop with about 25 participants, especially protected area managers from across the country. And by the end of the workshop, we had outlined a shared vision and preliminary plans for 7 areas that were important for connectivity around Koytendog State Nature Reserve, which is in the far east of the country on the border with Uzbekistan. And at the same time, we were engaging these protected area managers from across the country to really think, how could they seize on opportunities for wider ecological network planning across the country and across the region. Furthermore, as Brent pointed out, the Target 3 guidance, we had also, at the time of the COP in Montreal, had contributed to the best practices in delivering 30 by 30. And in there is what we really saw as a start of a way of more comprehensively doing connectivity planning. And it does provide a step-by-step of how many of you could go about considering that work. And the work on that planning framework continues to evolve. And I think we're getting closer and closer to being able to really show the full toolkit of what can be used. And tailored to the ways in your context, in your landscapes where you work, so that you can actually get your head around all of the things that may be happening in the landscape, understand the best ways to seize on the common opportunities, but also how to deal with many of the specific challenges you may be facing. And more, we've been talking about using systematic conservation planning in a way to assess the existing protected areas, and also then to integrate connectivity planning in a more systematic way. So we will have more tools available, and we would be glad to talk more with you about how to deploy those things. And then I just wanted to point out that there's a new IUCN technical report that we'll be publishing. Hopefully it'll be done in the next month or so. And that is actually all about addressing the impacts that roads and railways and canals especially have on ecological connectivity, on protected areas, and the places that connect them. And so this publication is especially focused on applying the mitigation hierarchy and how best to conserve connectivity when you're developing, constructing, and operating new infrastructure. And that's the end of my presentation.
Muchas gracias. Creo que para también los asistentes y...
Thank you very much. I think that for the participants and that are members of the commissions of the IUCN, it is very important to understand and know about these exercises that are being carried out in other regions, that we have guidelines that are available to interpret and respond some of the questions that might come up as to how to make that connectivity. So all those components that are there, thanks for having created them. And I know that we are a little behind schedule to be able to close with you with our last intervention or participation, expert participation that is going to be very short in this case, and that we're going to have the opportunity of talking much more, which is our delegate Clara Masallana. Clara has worked many years in the identification precisely of effective strategies for the preservation or conservation, sorry, in the territories. She has also worked on the integration and dialogue between the different stakeholders, both public and private, as well as community. And we have, apart from that, the great honor of having Clara working with us in the year 2016 as part of the specialist group in other effective measurements of conservation based on areas, which has and she has a beautiful story that we have here that we wanted to remember and refresh, and with which we're going to have the opportunity of discussing in detail. And today, we're going to listen to Clara talk about this for a few minutes regarding three small reflections that we have regarding these areas and the type of conservation, so that we may be able to continue on with the closing of our session. So please, the questions that you might have, we would also give a little time so that we might be able to talk about them. And don't forget that this is a first space of two webinars that we're going to have. So Clarita, the floor is yours now, and thanks all of you for your patience. Thank you very much, Paula, for the presentation, and thanks to all of you. It is pleasant to see so many people, so many friends, and so many people that are interested in these dialogues, that, as Paula has mentioned it, and the previous presenters also are very necessary in our region and also at the worldwide level. I think that we are in time to be able to have these more in-depth reflections, that we need to be able to have a better implementation of this goal 3 and all the elements that are being considered in this goal. More than a presentation, today I would like to make an invitation so that you might be able to connect. And next week, at the same time, same channel, we're going to have a reflection that is more in depth regarding the matter of other effective measures for conservation based on areas that has been mentioned in the different presentations that we have had today. They have become a very important strategy for the compliance with this goal. We see that they have been included in the goal 3. They were before in the IHE 11 goal, as many of you probably saw it. And the IUCN has been very active in the identification reporting of these initiatives, and precisely as these guidelines are implemented, we identify new challenges for the countries that have been implementing this working framework of the Americas. So precisely within that, we want to talk about those challenges, among which I can mention some of them that has been mentioned by some of the authors of different publications, like that of Good Practices, written by Dougley and Thornton, and other articles by other stakeholders that have been analyzing, and also with the result of the process that has been taken by some the countries in Latin America. These challenges have to do precisely with the need of acknowledging the diversity that we have, this denomination, the motivations, and all the different sources of management that we have in the strategies, because precisely we have seen and these conditions have been happening for many years, and precisely this is important for their recognition, and it is important to understand some topics that are related. For example, what is the function of these strategies in the consolidation of the areas, the conservation areas, and we saw the matters of connectivity that are so important, especially in regard to the marine matter, as such as demonstrating that they contribute to the conservation of biodiversity, and that is one of the topics that is most important, and one of the challenges that is most complex that we have been faced to at the moment of applying these guidelines. Something that is important also is to avoid the unlawful use of this framework for quantitative goals. And Brett mentioned this in his presentation because the goal number 3 is more quantitative goal, and we have to have that included in all the qualitative goals that we have been looking at this morning. It is important to guarantee the application of this framework, the OMEC framework, by using good practices to strengthen the good governance, the existing good governance, and not to change the ways of governance that exist in the territories that have been identified and that are going to acknowledge these measures of conservation. And a point that is very important that we are also going to see next week is how can we guarantee enough resources for the strengthening of capacities and to be able to identify and sustain in the long term for these measurements. So I want to point out here that for the protected areas of Latin America and the Caribbean, the Lima Declaration, and it is that the region has a great potential to identify and give more visibility to these other effective measurements for conservation based on areas. Taking into account the other goals that have been mentioned or challenges that have been mentioned, and these works that have been advanced, the IUCN through the OMEC experts has wanted to create a focus group for Latin America and the Caribbean to discuss this in detail. As I mentioned, we're going to have a little bit more next week. But what we wanted to be able to promote and divulge these tools that are promoted from the CIMAT to have a change of experience and to have the best challenges and lessons learned, the needs toward the identification, strengthening, and a report of the OMEC, as mentioned by Monica in her presentation. The countries of Latin America and the Caribbean are facing different moments, so it is a space to be able to discuss and to have feedback and the actions that are taking place from the different instances. It's also very important to identify programs and projects that have been developed by the countries to include them in the virtual platform of the 2030 goal, because this allows us to visualize all these lessons learned that have been taking place from different stakeholders. And it is important to point out the good practices that have been implemented from the different countries in the OMEC framework, and to promote those spaces for discussion regarding the important aspects for the strengthening of OMEC in the region.
pues dejo aquí para que pasemos a las preguntas.
So we can go back to Q&A and invite you for next week so we can reflect detailed in these aspects related with the SOMEC. Thank you. Thank you very much to you. This is an important invitation to all of you. I hope we can join us and within 8 days. In this way, we can land all these aspects that has been having lots of amplification in our region. And we're in a key moment to be able to learn about these lessons that already have been learned, that Clara already mentioned, and we can establish a new pathway where to go to. We will wait for you guys. I know it has been different comments and sharings in the chat. Thank you so much about that. And I would like to address the time. If you can give us away 5 minutes more, that you can guys maybe share publicly. If you have any question about the reflections that we have done particularly, or informations overall we have been shared today in the chat, and as fast as possible we will try to share it. Please, if you have any questions, comments, or you can raise your hand, I will be aware of it and we can talk about it. Thank you.
Y en todo caso, como mencionamos, tenemos este siguiente espacio.
So like we mentioned, we have this space to have like a share. Jasmine Arias, we have your hand raised. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much for the people that exposed today, their presentations. It was very rich and to get knowledge about how has been working in the fulfillment of the target number 3, related specifically about conservation, showing also the voids about the knowledge that we have and how we can work among to fulfill those voids, and also to understand who are the ones that are making the decisions in the different states and in national different places. I want to comment about the last presentation because it was, I believe that is very important, that something that it was highlighted in it, to respect the types of governance that already exist, and mostly in the original regions and communities, because they have their own system of governance and government. And a lot of times there is conflicts when the institutions, environmental institutions or governmental institutions try to get there to implement knowledge or strategies that comes from science or other strategies, and sometimes might not be so efficient, or maybe never, it will erase what the communities have been doing. So it's very, very important to get into this dialogue about what are they doing already in their territory, and it is working for them, and then try to understand it from the academy and from the institutions to be able to find those merging points that we can strengthen together these other experiences of the territories. I believe that this is a moment that now we are starting to learn this other knowledge and these other ways of governance, and it maybe will be good to implement it in different strategies that are going to be proposed from the government, institutions, academy, in order to work in a collective way with the people and their different realities. Thank you. Thanks to you for that comment. I believe that we're going to take notes of what you were mentioning, because it is a key fact that we're going to be sharing 8 days. So we're very happy with this type of reflections. So let's go ahead and continue having conversations. Thank you. I don't have any other person. I see in the chat, they're responding to each other and sharing. we're always with this double way of sharing tools, the division of the conversation. So it is part of it. It is part of what we have now. So with this, I would like to let you go. I know that you guys all have other commitments and you provide us with a very important part of time of your agendas. And these reflections, we really will like for all of us to reflect again with all the possibilities that we can continue having conversations, invite ones that are not part of the organizations, but also support them to be able to join. And the base of the experience, it is on you, the ones that are in the fields, the ones that are doing, creating new tools to support the protected areas. So thank you very much. Please remember, in 8 days, we have our second session of the dialogue, particularly concentrated on OMEC, but also to capture all these different moments and data for this new dimension that is being opened with this new compromise and a global way in which this commission has a very strong voice, and we want to strengthen with this platform 3030 in the Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much, and see you in 8 days. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and so great to have you here. Goodbye.
Excelente día a todos.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Gracias, muchas gracias.
Gracias, un buen día para todos.
Gracias, buen día para todos.
Colegas de Lingocol, muchísimas gracias por todo el apoyo. Creo que salió perfecto, ¿no? El tema de la traducción, no hubo ahí inconvenientes de, no sé, de saltos de canales y eso. Muchas gracias de verdad. Yo no puedo oírlos en inglés ni portugués, pero sé que estuvo perfecto.
Está bien, con mucho gusto. Yo ya voy a renderizar los videos y después se los paso. Bernardo se los va a pasar para que sepa.
Ok, listo,
Está bien,
excelente.
listo, muchas gracias por todo.
Mil gracias. Dale,
Hasta
chao.
luego.